Hello, ladies and gentlemen of YouTube. I am Clementine, as always. I am Super Saiyan. Never mind that. This whole thing starts a while back when I finished that oak table guitar. That was when I received this comment by a viewer. Skepticism toward a crucial piece for presentation. You don't have a studio quality audio of the guitar with at least Shure SM57. Legit. Well, damn. Sometimes it's just so damn accurate that it just cuts your guts out. So I left some kind of sheepish half remark where I attempted to pull some type of a sheer cover in over my inequity and maybe lack of gumption and general inadequacies. And yep, bro, you exactly right. So in this video, we're gonna take some wood and other supplies from Home Depot along with some speakers from Facebook Marketplace and some other doobly-doos from all around them internets. And we gonna do some cutting and banging and screwing and spreading and tacking and spraying and stretching. Some more banging, some more screwing, then some smoking. No fancy joining or miter work, simplified floating baffle design. All hand tools, no router needed. Extra thick 4-ply yellow pine decking used as all 4 sides of back and baffle. Oversized pine bracing on both the baffle and on the inside. And 320 watts worth of vintage Celestion and Ruby speakers from the 90s. I'll take a vintage Shure 57 to it and plug all kinds of shit into it and see what it do. If this sounds like something you might be interested in, stay tuned! First, I want to dedicate this video to Jim Marshall, who taught us all how to rock in the first place, and to my dad, Jim, who taught me how to do all the stuff you're going to see in this video. And while I get this plywood all situated and start marking it out, I want to talk a little bit about why I did and you may elect to build your own Marshall clone cab when you can actually find deals on them like this. Well, that'd be about the same reason that this one costs this, and this one that's almost looks identical costs this. Because they ain't the same. And the one that I want doesn't even exist, so I explain my choices and the reasons behind them as I go. And as always, for that young kid or person down on their luck in like Mississippi or Detroit or maybe even Africa, you got combo amp and some hi-fi speakers. I'm not telling you to take the plywood off the window of that abandoned house because it probably does have cedar closets. That's a joke, but if you can get permission to do that, definitely do that. Either way, I obviously got my wood at Home Depot, and just 2 sheets of plywood would build you like a big gigantic 15-inch angle cap. It takes a lot less wood than you would think it does, especially if you lay it out good, but I'm just laying mine out to get the most square edges as I can, factory edges. Because I want to show y'all all this can be done with just a marker and a skill saw. You don't need no guide. You don't need no fancy table saw. The reason for that is none of it has to actually be completely square. And you can see I'm using a set of printed out plans here. I'm not going to give you plans to how to copy a passable Marshall in this video. And either way, mine is like the size of the big 60s Hendrix Marshall, but it looks like the 80s one. It's deeper, it's wider, and the baffle fits inside the box a completely different way. Now, if you are scared of just taking a skill saw in your hands to some very expensive plywood and maybe getting way off the line and burning the blade up and stuff, you can take and measure how far it is from your blade to the edge of your skill saw guard. Then you can measure that from the mark that you have made and make another mark. Go to the other end, do the same thing. Take a board and lay it across and use clamps on it, and you have made your own guide. And once you get good at setting this up, you can just start hauling ass and just ripping. The most efficient way I found to do it was make a bunch of long strips that were roughly as wide as I wanted my cabinet deep. Then you can chop them roughly how wide and tall you want it. You can make them oversized now. You have plenty of time to refine them. And one surefire way to make sure that they'll match each other is to just clamp them together and cut them together. And you can see here I'm looking at them plans again, and I'll tell you, you can get them on Google, but really if you're building your own size cabinet, you don't much need them. There's only 8 main pieces of wood in a 1968 angle cabinet, and 5 of them are just rectangles. So what I'm doing right here is marking that angle on the side panels. I think I measured it around 16 inches, and then I just leaned it back to the angle that I wanted it to be and marked it in. Now I clamped the 2 sides together and cut them at the same time, and I know that they cannot be wrong. They're identical. Rough emery cloth on a sanding beam can also save you a hell of a lot of heartache and trouble. In fact, the more that you go around and use it to square up things and make sure that all the corners are just a little bit rounded where they don't chip off later and stuff, the whole thing will just work out better in general. And yeah, you can wrap sandpaper around a board and do the exact same thing. But now that you have those 2 links cut out on your sides, you can start roughing out the front baffles. And yes, the big front angled baffle ain't nothing but 2 rectangles of wood. They do need to be the exact same width so you can clamp them together and cut them at the same time. And do note that the baffle will need to be a little bit narrower than the top and bottom so that it'll be able to fit inside the box. And if you feel fancy, you could even cut angles on your baffles, but it's really not necessary. And what I'm doing here is marking the center of my speaker holes, and I chose to move mine a little bit further to the top and bottom of the baffles and a little bit further to the outside edges because of what I'm going to do with my braces later, as you'll see. An actual Marshall, the speakers are very close to each other. All 4 of them are almost in the center of the baffle. Tracing it with a Sharpie might make it easier to see. And what I did here was mark 2 circles smaller than the size of the actual speaker so I could get a little practice of using this jigsaw. See if it'd be good enough for the video, good enough to tell you guys go ahead, use a jigsaw. You can make a good round circle with it. It worked perfect. You don't really need a router or one of those circle making jigs. After sanding it, it's just fine. So I popped that plug back in there and marked them up to 12 inches with the compass, traced them with the Sharpie, and I just started popping holes. The faster your blade is moving and the slower your hands are moving, the better it will cut. And try to stay a whole lot on the inside and then use your time to sand. Real life ain't like 16 times speed like YouTube. The longer you take to do it, the better of a result you're going to get, which is going to be behind grill cloth and no one will see it but you, ever. One thing to note is that the hole for a 12-inch speaker, even if you're front loading the cabinet, needs to be smaller than 12 inches or the speaker just fall inside of the cabinet. And if you're back loading it the way a Marshall cabinet does, it needs to be even smaller than that. Another little tip is this little triangle that you cut out of the side here, however wide that is, you can mark that on the top, the lid to the box, and rip it right off of there. And now it is magically the proper size. So here I'm making a roughly 1/8 inch black mark all the way around that speaker hole because I've made it as large as it could be without that speaker falling through it. And this is sound design choice as too much of a lip. Protruding into the sound path of the speaker will make a honky echo sound. And this is extra crucial because I'm using a big beefy 1/4 inch hardware, and these even larger inserts leave no room for error at all. But luckily it all worked out just barely. So now it's time to take this solid steel cupping handle, because apparently I didn't know this, but apparently Marshalls have plastic handle housings. Anyway, we'll just take this one and use it to mark out a square on one of the angled sides and cut that out with a jigsaw quite jankily because no one will ever see it. Then use that one as a template to half-ass mark out another square on the other one and even more jankily cut it out because no one's gonna see it. Except for about 14,000 people. But anyway, I finalized my baffles and I elevated one of them at an angle with some scrap lumber and such that was laying about my feet, and I went to slathering the liquid nail. Spread that shit generously like Bondo or cake icing to fill any gap, and then slap you a strip of plywood or a board down on there and start sending them sheetrock screws into it. Don't worry about the logistics of the angles or how this is supposed to actually work, it just does. If it starts to try to pull itself up or get too flat, you can always loosen them screws and then put them back in less, or better than that, angle them a different angle and then suck them down so it'll hold itself at an angle. Now you can take some more liquid nails, flip it over and spread it across the front like Bondo and fill in that complete gap. And yeah, this is still gonna feel kind of floppy. It's gonna feel kind of crappy. Set it aside to dry. Just make sure it's at the exact angle that you want it to be at for the rest of all time. And now here's another tip. If you follow what I do in the rest of this video with this simple lap joinery, you'll need to account for one plywood thickness, because without fancy finger joinery, your two pieces of plywood do not overlap with each other. And boom de bam, all the hard parts are over. The rest of this is really a breeze. So I'm gonna take this bottom piece that's warped up like a tater chip, and that don't matter as long as your warp is going down and the pressure being put on it in the future is gonna make it warp up. Go back and look at them baffles. So I just squirt me a bunch of this extra heavy duty liquid nail on there, and then I put it together, throw a square in there and sink about 4 drywall screws into it. So that's really how I'm gonna do this? That's flimsy. 4 screws, that shit's gonna fall apart. But yeah, it's flimsy now. The liquid nail is still squishy, and it ain't a box yet. Put that other side on, smash that top in there with a fine slathering of liquid nail and about 10 sheetrock screws and viola. Almost messed up and said voila. Either way, look, a half stack just materialized there. And now's a good time to take that liquid nail and start using it like Bondo, putty, caulk, crack filler, everything you can. Find any voids you can in this 4-ply wood, countersink and cover all them screws, and it's still gonna feel flimsy as hell. Go inside, take a break, let it dry overnight. You should awake in the morning to find that it has become much stiffer, as if it has taken a Viagra in the night. It's still gonna be a little bit flimsy, don't break it, it's just a square, it's not a box yet. Don't worry if the joints aren't perfect or if it's bubbled up or warped out of square. Everything we do from here on out, it's just gonna make it strong and square. So here I'm taking some pine fern strips from that big old bin at the Home Depot and trying to figure out you guys a cheat code way of creating a lip around this that's already pretty much round. An actual Marshall uses a little strip of plywood inside, glued and tacked flat to the inside of the box. Not only is it a lot of danger to cut that many strips with a skill saw, you're giving up a lot of cubic airspace inside your box. You can see I ain't using nothing but a little trim coping saw, like a tiny hacksaw, and laying these things up here and filling to make sure that they're flush with my hand and cutting them. No tape measure, nothing like that. You can just go around laying them up there and cutting them down to size. As far as these angles go, you can just guesstimate those by like sawing straight down. But once again, don't worry too much about it. You got liquid nail or Bondo to fill in any gaps. And then when it comes time to attach them, that construction adhesive is your friend. Just put that shit everywhere. And if you're using solid pine boards and sheetrock screws like this, you want to stay about like 6 to 8 inches from the ends. If you put enough adhesive under them, they will dry stiff and sturdy. Now if you're using an air stapler or air tacker, you can get pretty close to the end, and also if you're using strips of plywood, shouldn't really matter. But as you can see here with especially with these 2 little short ones that go on this angle on the front, like it's tempting to want to put that screw toward the end and make sure it's real strong, but if you do, it'll just bust it. And there you can see that guesstimated angle, it doesn't really fit, but that adhesive will squirt right up from the bottom and fill that crack perfectly. And this is the key. The more liquid nail or construction adhesive that you use in this hack job building style, that is the defining factor in that you don't have no buzzes or rattles. Everything looks smoother and more uniform when it's done, and you can throw it out of a moving truck and it won't come apart. And keeping with that theme, let's start doing the same thing to the baffle. Once again, you can just lay them up there, mark them and cut them, Same as we did with the front pieces. Don't get the screws too close to the ends, and the more liquid nail you use, the better it'll sound. I think the original Marshall just uses like little thin veneers or plywood strips. I'm using these big pieces of pine not only because they're available and look how easy this is to do. Once again, first priority is a sound design choice. This baffle is going to be like thick, heavy, and hard as a rock when it's done. It also has the secret to why I moved all those speaker holes to the corners. Look how much of that brace goes over that speaker cone, but only on two sides. So it creates like a little pocket in there. I can point the mic in there and get all the nasally mids that I want. And furthermore, that kind of shields you from the sound and puts a big old resonant chunk of plywood right in the center of the cabinet where the brace is going to be attached to my back door, which is also going to be this same 4-ply sheathing. Apparently ever since the 70s, Marshall uses like a particle board back door. And according to Johann Sedgborn, who I've learned so much stuff from, they do sound different. Like I said before, I learned about this stuff from my dad. When he first taught me how to do this, we was building a set of like wedge monitors. And from that first joint that he screwed together, I was like, man, this shit's flimsy. This is retarded. It ain't gonna work. Well, like, this part's warped. That part don't look professional. And he's like, we didn't sand it yet, dumbass. Well, this part don't fit perfect. I'm sanding it, but it ain't right. Oh, it'll be covered up. Oh no, I tightened this screw too much. This thing busted. It's the end of the world. My dad be like, put some liquid nails on there and clamp it. Good Lord, you can sand it when you're done. Well, it ain't never gonna be as good as a real one. I ain't got no router. Well, take this file and this sandpaper and go make it round. Damn, son, what did you think they did before electricity? Stick that same baffle painted black into that same cabinet, sanded down, and what don't look professional now? Now, if you shot a coat of plasti dip or truck bed liner on this thing, it's good to go. Put you some of that expanded steel grating on the front. Metal as hell. But a quick look behind the scenes shows that, yeah, it still looks like crap inside and it's warped. That's not a problem. I'm gonna go inside and let that paint dry. So here's something that would seem to be simple on first observance, but could actually be quite complicated and require some maths. The bracing that holds the back door in and that the back door screws to needs to be a certain amount inside the cabinet if you want that back door to fit flush against the back of the cabinet like an original Marshall. Well, you just back it up the thickness of that one piece of plywood you're going to use, right? Well, no, because you're going to have that back door covered maybe, and maybe that cabinet covered. Tolex is actually thick as hell when it's glued onto plywood. So you got to account for 2 layers of glue and Tolex on the back door and 1 layer of glue and Tolex on your cabinet. So this brace needs to be placed exactly 1 thickness of plywood, 1 thickness of Tolex, and 1 thickness of glue inside of the cabinet. And then I'd say plus a little bit. You'd rather have that back door inset than sticking out. Well, now that I got everything marked and stuff, you can see that the bottom is still warped. So what I need to fix that is a heavily warped brace. Slather liquid nail all over the place and then put them against each other like bow and arrow and crank it down. Imagine how stiff that is now. And the top or the lid of the cabinet is bowed up a little bit so I can do the exact same thing. And I put that bowed up because if you put a heavy head or more amps on it, you want it to bow down. Over time, it become more flat. In construction, this is called crowning. Now, the side pieces are just a little bit different. If you want to be able to install and remove your baffle from the back door like the original Marshalls, these need to be cut at a steep angle, just about even with the top of the handles. It'll be clear later in the video why this was necessary. Then they're installed the same way, just lots of liquid nails and screws. Then be sure to slather that stuff all about. The more the merrier. And here I am cheating using a palm sander to remove the excess. And this next part I actually learned from my mother, who restored classic cars for a living my entire childhood and most of my life. And what I'm doing here is mixing some Bondo brand automotive plastic body filler with way too much hardener. That stuff ain't as red as it used to be. Anyway, you can just start grabbing up big gobs of this stuff, moving as quickly as you can. Smear it in everywhere that has a low spot or anywhere you think it'll even stick. Don't do it thin and pretty, it'll crack and bust off when you play loud. Put it on thick and ugly. Then we rinse and repeat this process of mixing Bondo, applying it as quick as we can in a thick and ugly fashion. Then just a little bit of sanding, some more sanding, and sanding, a little bit more sanding and some sanding. This is why I did not enter the auto body field. Oh, and some more sanding. And now she really is slick. Like, you could put a couple of thick coats of primer on this thing, sand it back, and like paint it metallic candy apple Corvette red. And that's all I did that day, because that sanding wiped me out. So, cutting out the back door ain't all that different than doing that mathing for that back brace that it's going to screw into. Ideally, you want it tight in your cabinet, but you got to account for 2 layers of tolex on each side with glue, and it's wrapped around corners so it's puckering out. Either way, once you get it figured and marked out using something straight like a board, you can cut it out with just a skill saw. Ain't gotta be completely perfect. This one fits great, almost as if I measured it to. And there's that little bit of gap I was talking about. That's exactly like what I guesstimated to be 4 tolexes, 4 glues, and like a little bit of breathing room. And now I'm going to the 4 edges of this door and measuring back about the distance of 1/2 of a cap head screw. Then marking straight lines using the straight edge. Once I measured and marked all 4 sides, I was able to start taking a measurement from each side and find a center, and then figure out where I wanted my screws to lay out from there. And you can pre-drill all the holes. This will make everything a whole lot easier for you later. Future you will be glad that now you did it. Anyway, now I can use the gasket that came with the jack plate for the back and measure and place it, and just use that to mark where I need to cut the hole. And I didn't think about this in my earlier editing, but for those of you that may have never used a jigsaw, you need to take a drill and drill a hole, or take a screwdriver and punch a hole in it with a hammer before you can get the jigsaw blade in there and to cut something that is not connected to the edge of your piece. I think that if you just tried to turn it on and sink it into the wood, it would probably just snap the blade. Also, check the fitment of everything before you cover anything. Future you will also be glad that now you did it. Oh, and once again, remember to leave room for tolex. And here you can see the reason for those angled braces. When you have to take this baffle in and out of this box, it has to come up, get angled back, and then pulled up and out the top. And I can't imagine doing it like loaded with 120 watt EVs or something. Well, honeymoon time is over. It's time to see if my fake jank routing job will fit these corner caps. And I cannot tell you how relieved I was to find that this is the case. So I got a screw in the back here that I didn't sink deep enough, so that when I rounded it over, it sticks up a little bit and it's holding that back corner up. So I'm just taking it down with a file. If I tried to sand it down, it would just keep on sticking up, eating up the sandpaper, but that file would hit that hard screw. So I started measuring and marking the 4 locations on the bottom of the cabinet that I was going to use to place the wheels. I went ahead and drilled pilots, and then I drilled the actual holes because I don't want to end up ripping my tolex later on accident.
Subscribe to Heavy Metal ATC.
So next I found and marked the rough center line on the exterior of the back door so that I could then roll out this big piece of perfect elephant grain pre-stamped, maybe is, maybe ain't Marshall tolex. But you can fold that back, finding the center line of it very easily, and you just put you 2 pieces of masking tape on there close to the ends, and that'll allow you to keep it straight and in a proper orientation. Well, you take you some contact cement and just baste half of it like a turkey. Then let that tack up for just about like a minute and a half, and put that 3M spray adhesive to the back of that tolex. Paint it. Then you just flop it down, smooth it out, grab the other side, flip it up, you'll feel where it sticks. Now just slather this side with the contact cement. Butter that toast good. Obviously don't do this indoors or you'll get higher than a kite or maybe get blown up. Then you just start spraying the holy moly out of it with that 3M Super 90 on this side and stick it down. And that's exactly how you recover a door panel, do a headliner or a hat rack in an old car. So now we just flip it over. We take and slather some more of that contact cement all around the perimeter of this door and paying special attention to the outside edge. Now you can take a sharp razor knife and go around to each corner and cut from that corner to the corner of your piece of tolex. Once you get all those done, you can just spray you some Super 90 all up around there and fold over the edge. Pull it tight and smooth it out just like wrapping Christmas presents. Then if you are a hyper-vigilant person such as myself, you can start popping staples all in it. Then once you fold over the other side and smooth it out, you just cut from that outside corner to the inside corner of the little box you've made. Then you can cut straight down to get that outside tag off, and then pull the other piece of tolex up and then get that triangle out from under there. Lay it all back down. Then of course you can continue with popping them staples. In fact, I actually like to go back and hit mine with a little hammer. But beware, if you break them with the little hammer, they will cut you. For the jack plate hole, you just cut an X, bend all 4 little things back, staple them and cut the points off. And boom, that back door is done. And really, if you already have a Marshall and you're watching this, I bet you make a back door like that out of this thick 4-ply sheet. Put it on your Marshall. I personally believe you will get a better, brighter, snappier tone. Well, anyway, before I start covering this cabinet, I'm gonna go ahead and run this black paint all the way around the back edge and the inside of the back lip, as well as the inside of the front edge and flaring out around each corner. This is cheap insurance for the rest of the life of this cabinet, that if you cut the tolex wrong on accident, or if the tolex shrinks over time, or if you bump it into something and the corner rips, it won't look like shit after that. So after that dries a little bit, I can set the cabinet upside down on a block of foam and get this one long continuous strip of tolex lined up on the top of this cabinet. And this is the reason I decided to go for that black, white, and gold 80s look, even though that I did the 100 watt size 60s dimensions. With this type of cabinet, you just start slathering you some stanky contact cement all over the bottom of it, and then up in the corners and on the sides, and spray that stuff on the back of the tolex and flap it on over and smooth it down. And you just grab that roll and rip it back to where it ain't stuck no more. Commence to slatherizing once again, spray the glue to it, smash it down, work your way on around the corner. And these corners might look scary, but they're not. You do the same thing you did on the back of the door. You just cut from the corner to the corner. Pull them extra pieces out of there and just beat the hell out of it with something till it looks good, like beautiful Squidward. Then you just go to slathering that big long side thoroughly. Spray the back of the tolex and start smoothing it out real good. Here I'm spraying extra glue through that hole in the side of the cabinet that the handle cup goes through. Then as a continuing theme, I just cut an X from corner to corner. I fold those in, stick them, and pop some tacks on the back side. And you do the exact same thing all the way around until you get back to where you started. And now I'm very delicately slathering on that contact cement, and I placed a couple pieces of tape on the first piece I started with to protect it, so I could shoot a whole bunch of glue on there. Folded it all over and used the back of the knife to smooth it down where I could see the edge of that tape real good. Then I just cut through all of it at once, both layers of tolex and the tape, and not really perfectly straight, it doesn't matter. Since you cut them all at the same time, you can pull out the remaining pieces, tear that tape out of there, and they will match perfectly together, and you just beat it till it's pretty, like a handsome Squidward. Well, anyway, if you try to work too fast like I did, you don't give your stuff time to gas off, you're gonna get bubbles like this. But don't worry, you poke them with a pen if you think you need it. These were all gone by the next day. So it's time to put on these corners. Okay, these split tacks may be a little bit hard to use at first, but once you drive like 4 or 5 of them, you'll be good at it. And once you drive like 6 or 7 of them, you're just like pa-pow, pa-pow, knocking them in. There was a whole lot more of them than I thought there was. It actually started trying to get dark on me, so I had to hurry up. And now this thing's already getting like pretty damn heavy, so I went ahead and started installing these wheel inserts. Pop them wheels in there. I didn't know this, but apparently real Marshall wheels just pop into these holes and lock in. I flip it over, and lo and behold, all that warped up wood ended up making something that's completely square, and all 4 wheels sit on this piece of plywood perfectly, and it rolls and spins just beautifully. So now, naturally, with it being a new day, the first thing I did, being all freshly sleep deprived and bushy-tailed, I noticed I needed to take me a chisel and clearance this speaker out a little bit, or it ain't gonna fit. And here's another easy cheat code way that I deviated from the original design of a Marshall cabinet. I got a roll of that big fat custom shop piping that's like really soft and rubbery, and it's about as big as a pencil, and just started tacking it along the inside lip of this cabinet. I think that on the actual Marshall, this is all stapled to the baffle. Well, either way, when you get up to the corner, all you have to do to make that perfect little bend is just to cut that little flat part that's attached to it, and it'll fold perfectly and tuck right into that corner so you can go down the other side. The way I'm configuring the baffle on this cabinet, this big thick rubbery stuff is going to be like a seal on a refrigerator door. This is going to hold the thing from buzzing and hold my sound in. After the baffle is covered, it's going to be wedged up in here and secured like a big O-ring. Anyway, you just work your way all the way around, cutting that flat part for each corner until you get back to where you started. And you can cut a little 45 miter there right on the end of it, and it'll butt and squish right together, and you won't be able to tell it's not just a continuous ring. Oh, as well, like I said, look, those bubbles are gone completely. I didn't touch them. They just gassed off and disappeared. And you pop that painted baffle back in here and it really starts to look like something. And at this point, if you live in any kind of high traffic area, I wouldn't leave this outside unattended for too long. And once this is in the shop close to that bike, you can see how big this damn thing really is. It ended up having like a odd duck sizes. It's like 32 inches tall, like 30.5 wide, but almost 15 inches deep. So right half in between like an AC/DC cabinet or a Hendrix cabinet. Since I chose to use the largest, most skookum hardware possible, they all had to be cut down. Now, an easy way to do this without ruining the threads is run them through a nut, chuck the nut into a vise or hold it with vice grips while you cut the bolt. Then when you run it out of there, it'll chase its own threads. Now, I do regret the fact that this is going to make some people inevitably angry. Obviously, by making this video and showing a completely different construction, I am not trying to take money from Jim's family. This is simply a tribute piece as well as free advertisement for that brand from the continuation of my channel. And as a red flag to ever keep this from being passed off as a real Marshall, you can see I'm arching this logo. Oh yeah, you just wait. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. And now I can place that arched up logo and template in an aesthetically pleasing place and go ahead and drill some permanent mounting holes so it can never be placed in any other fashion. Delicately curl it up and feed all them little pegs into them holes and pound it down, and I could pick this thing out of a whole wall of cabinets in about 2 seconds. My old lady could not stand the way this looked. She was like, that is not right. You have to fix it. I like it. I think it looks extra fancy. Here's a sound design choice that people may not think of. The grill cloth you choose is extremely important in regards to the overall sound of the finished cabinet, especially in close mic recording. So instead of going for the typical 80s like basket weave type of grill cloth, I went with the tiny rocking chair wicker filling folded paper net kind of stuff. Anyway, this is simple, but it can be difficult if you don't have any help. So what you need to do is take you some clamps and clamp it down. That way you can make sure you got one edge pulled pretty tight and everything's in a proper orientation. You can put some tacks in there. Don't worry about trying to get this stuff tight on the top or the first side. Then when it comes time to stretch it in and tack it, you can't get this stuff drumhead tight. Like the way it's made is like a twisted brown cardboard handles that used to be on those bags that you would get at the mall. What I'm saying is you can rip this stuff, but all that airspace you can see through it will keep any drunk people from standing right in front of your amp. But if I just shove this baffle in here real quick and spin this around, check that shit out. So to put this logo on here, the best thing to do is put a light behind you where you can see through that grill cloth. Now you can take a nail, coat hanger, something like that, start stabbing it down into them holes and then making circles and spreading the grill cloth away from the holes. Then you just kind of feed all them legs in there and push it in real easy. You can break it. Oh, and by the way, how did I get this logo, right? From Yamaha. Well, anyway, now it's time to put this little 3D printed badge holder in the corner. My little personal touch on this was to kind of put it over and crooked like it got the hell knocked out of it back in the day. Pop that little aluminum 1960 lead badge in there. So now to make some braces for inside this cabinet. I measure and mark the distance from the baffle to the back brace. Cut a pair of those just a bit oversized with a handsaw. Wedge those in there and then start beating them down into place, smashing that baffle up against that front lip. Send some screws through there and then start knocking the set up top the same exact way. I'm not using liquid nail on these, I'm only screwing these because I do want them to be removable in the future if I want to remove the baffle. And now the last thing we got to build is a sound post. You want to take some kind of hard, tough, beefy board. You want to smear some glue on there and then take another short board that's also made of a hard, tough wood that's good at conducting sound. This one I'm using cedar. Then just screw that on there like a shape of a T. And here I've laid a scrap board from corner to corner so that I can use it as a gauge to mark the sound post. Then you just chop that thing off. Slather all kind of glue inside that baffle because when you screw in wood this hard, it's probably gonna bust. And now we can talk about the most important part of the entire cabinet, the speakers. These are the number one determining factor in the sound of your cabinet, guitar rig, amp, head, every bit of it. The speakers are what make the sound. So if that's the case, why am I using these crappy, mismatched, Tony Explode looking chrome Walmart wannabe garbage speakers? Well, obviously that's because they ain't. I could have made a whole nother video of like all the repairing, matching, finding, buying and trading and testing speakers that I did for about 3 weeks. So the black ones are pretty rare and expensive Ruby Tubes branded replacement speakers. They're an 80 watt, 8 ohm, purple cone spec'd out version of like a Celestion Vintage 30. And I got them from a local Muscle Shoals studio guy with a very famous last name for $15 a piece. As well as one of those chrome ones for the same, but mind you, this was in a lot of a shitload of speakers. But also thank you very much, Trey. Well, either way, it's those rubies that are giving me that like AC/DC squalling kind of mid-forward hard rock sound, and those Celestians are the exact opposite. They got that Stevie Ray Vaughan Hendrix kind of scoop sound. Oh, and the reason that I'm running this super thick wire all crisscrossed everywhere up in here crazy looking is because I'm using 8 ohm speakers, but I want the impedance of the entire cabinet to remain at 8 ohms. That way it can be daisy chained with another cabinet to make a 16 ohm full stack. But the way I'm doing this wiring is by putting one black and chrome one in series, and then another black and chrome one in series for two 16 ohm pairs, and then I'm running those in parallel to have an 8 ohm final impedance. Because I am not building this cabinet for a stage, I'm building it for YouTube to do examples. It needs to be really clear, really loud, lot of headroom, very versatile. And this is the reason why I built the thing out of that 4-ply sheathing. That's just 4 skinny pieces of pine board that have been glued together. If I was making this for a country player, I'd use EVs and solid pine board. Transversely, if I was like a doom metal player, I'd have wanted vintage 30s and OSB with air staples and wood glue and no braces. Of course, this just is horses for courses, but taking a listen to this back door.
Subscribe to Heavy Metal ATC.